welcome to the deep dive. So imagine treating your incredibly powerful modern smartphone simply as a wireless landline.
Right?
Like you have this device capable of fundamentally restructuring how you interact with the entire world, but you only use it to, make phone calls from your kitchen table.
It's a massive waste of potential.
Exactly. And that is exactly what a shocking number of leaders are doing right now with hybrid work.
Yeah, they really are.
And it's causing a mass exodus. We're looking at a comprehensive paper today by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. And the stats in here are, well, they're wild.
Absolutely staggering.
Nearly 69% of Generation Z's voluntary turnover stems directly from dissatisfaction with work fulfillment. They're specifically citing inadequate work-life balance and a lack of real flexibility. So they're just packing up and leaving.
And we have to remember the sheer scale of this group.
Right. For you listening, just for some demographic context, Gen Z represents a demographic equivalent to roughly 28% of Indonesia's entire population.
Right.
It's a massive chunk of the global workforce.
It is. They are rapidly taking over, and the traditional corporate model is, frankly, completely failing them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to move way beyond that simplistic remote versus office debate, right?
Right, because that 69% figure, it's the ultimate wake-up call. It proves that what organizations are offering right now is just fundamentally misaligned with the psychological requirements of the modern worker.
So, Dr. Westover's research, what does it actually tell us about the state of hybrid work?
Well, it makes it abundantly clear that hybrid work is no longer just a pandemic-era emergency response. It has evolved into a permanent structural reality.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Exactly. But the core issue is that just handing someone a laptop and telling them, oh, you can work from your dining room table on Fridays, that's merely a logistical shift.
It's just moving the physical location of the keyboard.
Precisely. For hybrid work to actually prevent burnout and keep this generation engaged, that basic logistical flexibility has to be paired with deep psychological support.
And really intentional work design, I imagine.
Yes, very intentional.
Okay, so we know why Gen Z is leaving, but what are they actually looking for? Because I think we need to draw a very hard line here between two concepts that leadership teams constantly confuse: job satisfaction and work fulfillment.
Oh, they're entirely different beasts.
Are leaders basically just assuming that if they provide like a comfortable ergonomic chair at home and a reliable direct deposit, their employees should just be thrilled?
That is the exact trap. I mean, job satisfaction is really just about contentment with your working conditions.
So the baseline stuff.
Right. It's the salary, the benefits, maybe the lack of a terrible commute.
Essential, but not exactly inspiring.
No, not at all. Job satisfaction keeps you from complaining. But work fulfillment, that is a multidimensional psychological experience.
Which means what exactly?
It means experiencing your work as intrinsically satisfying, you're autonomously motivated, and the work is an authentic expression of yourself. Fulfillment is what actually gives you a compelling reason to open your laptop with energy every single morning.
I got to push back on that a little bit, though.
Okay, go for it.
Isn't it incredibly risky for a young professional to demand that their 9-to-5 job be an, quote, authentic expression of self?
How do you mean?
I mean, let's be real here. Sometimes a spreadsheet is just a spreadsheet. Setting the bar at authentic self-expression for every single administrative task, that just feels like a recipe for constant crushing disappointment.
That's a really fair point, but what's fascinating here is that the research proves this isn't just some generational quirk or entitlement.
It's not just Gen Z being demanding.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It is a biological and psychological necessity. It's rooted in something called self-determination theory, or SDT.
Okay, let's break down SDT for the listener.
So this framework argues that human beings have three non-negotiable psychological needs. First is autonomy.
Meaning self-direction, like being the boss of your own time.
Exactly. Feeling like you are the author of your own actions. Second is competence.
So being good at what you do.
Right. It's that fundamental need for mastery, effectiveness, and knowing you actually bring value. And the third is relatedness.
Which is connection, belonging, feeling like you're part of a tribe.
You nailed it.
So if we drag those three pillars, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, into a hybrid work environment, how do they actually hold up?
Well, they're put under immense stress if the environment isn't engineered correctly.
Give me an example.
Let's look at competence. In a traditional office, you get a constant stream of microfeedback.
Like a nod from a manager in a meeting or a quick, great job in the hallway.
Right. You feel competent. But in a poorly designed remote setup, you send a report into the digital void and you hear absolutely nothing back for 2 days.
Oh, wow. Yeah, in the absence of physical cues, that silence just feels like a massive failure. Your sense of competence plummets.
It does. And relatedness suffers the exact same fate. Without the casual collision of, bumping into someone making coffee, you are just a node on a screen.
So autonomy seems like the only one that naturally benefits from remote work, right? Because you control your own schedule.
Actually, even autonomy is a double-edged sword here.
Wait, really? How so?
Because if you have schedule flexibility, but your manager is secretly tracking your keystrokes or monitoring your mouse movement.
Oh yeah, that awful tracking software.
Exactly. If that's happening, you don't actually have autonomy. You just have a different, more invasive flavor of micromanagement.
That makes total sense.
And the paper points out a crucial mediating mechanism here. Flexibility and balance, those are just the raw materials.
Okay, so how do we get to actual fulfillment?
To create work fulfillment, those raw materials have to be funneled through something called employee engagement.
And how does the research define engagement?
It's defined by vigor, dedication, and absorption in the task. You don't get fulfillment just by sitting on your couch in sweatpants.
Right.
You get it when your flexible environment actually allows you to dive into a state of deep, uninterrupted focus.
Okay, so if fulfillment is the psychological engine and engagement is the fuel, what happens when we suffer from a fulfillment deficit?
The fallout is severe.
Because treating hybrid work like a glorified wireless landline sounds a lot like sensory deprivation. If the physical cues of the office are gone and fulfillment isn't purposefully built into the system, it's got to hurt the bottom line.
The financial impact alone should terrify any executive.
Let's hear the numbers.
The research indicates that replacing an employee who leaves due to a lack of fulfillment costs between 50% to 200% of their annual salary.
200%. That is wild.
It is, because that accounts for recruitment, onboarding, the lag in productivity, and crucially, the institutional knowledge that just permanently walks out the door.
And what about the people who stay but are miserable?
That's the more insidious cost. It's the silent killer of productivity, reduced discretionary effort.
Meaning they aren't necessarily quitting, they're just psychologically withdrawing. Like doing the absolute bare minimum to keep the paychecks clearing.
Yes, quiet quitting, basically. And that is often more damaging than outright turnover.
Because they're taking up space on the payroll but adding no real value.
Right. They complete the required tasks, sure, but they never volunteer for a challenging new project. They completely stop innovating.
And if they are in a customer-facing role like healthcare, education, professional services, that has to bleed over to the client.
Absolutely. The lack of fulfillment triggers a phenomenon known as surface acting.
Surface acting. Like pasting on a fake smile for a client Zoom call when you were just fundamentally disconnected from the work.
Precisely that. It is the exhausting process of displaying the required emotions without genuinely feeling them.
And humans are pretty good at spotting that,
But
right?
incredibly adept. The research highlights that clients and customers subconsciously pick up on surface acting immediately.
Which directly erodes the organization's reputation and the quality of the service.
It's a lose-lose situation.
Wait, so let me ask this on behalf of the listener. If I am fundamentally unfulfilled from 9 to 5, and I am burning all this cognitive energy on surface acting all day,
Yeah.
how does that spill over into my personal life? Because it can't just magically shut off at 5 p.m.
It doesn't, not at all. And this is where the individual psychological cost becomes really severe.
What happens?
The paper outlines how employees stuck in this transactional orientation, where they just work for a paycheck, they often engage in compensatory behaviors.
Compensatory behaviors. What does that look like?
Well, when your job provides absolutely zero psychological reward, you frantically try to force your non-work life to make up the difference.
Oh, wow. You mean like subconsciously putting an insane amount of pressure on your weekend pottery class or your spouse to provide 100% of your life's joy and meaning?
That is exactly the mechanism.
Just to balance out the misery of the workday? That sounds exhausting.
It is. You place unsustainable pressure on your hobbies and your relationships. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a powerful bidirectional relationship between work fulfillment and mental health.
Because the physical buffer is gone.
Right. In a traditional office, you had a physical support network, coworkers you could vent to, an environment that provided some separation.
But in a hybrid world, you are often just sitting alone in your house.
Exactly. So the protective psychological effects of actually finding fulfillment in your work are more crucial than ever. You don't have the physical office to absorb the stress anymore.
Okay, so if the financial and psychological costs of this deficit are so catastrophic, there have to be organizations figuring out how to stop the bleeding.
There are. The research outlines a very clear corporate playbook.
Awesome. Who is actually getting this right, and how are they doing it? Let's dive into the 5 evidence-based strategies.
Let's start with the first strategy, structured flexibility.
Structured flexibility. That sounds a bit like an oxymoron.
It does, but the key word there is structured. Leaving hybrid work entirely up to individual whim creates absolute chaos and inequity.
Okay, so who's doing it right?
Microsoft recognized this early on, so they implemented team-level guidelines and deployed technology for seamless transitions. But the most critical element of their approach is how their leaders explicitly model boundary management.
I love that. Because if the CEO is firing off emails at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, a so-called flexible policy is completely meaningless.
Exactly.
Everyone down the chain feels terrified and pressured to be online, regardless of what the HR handbook says.
The stated policy means nothing if the behavioral modeling contradicts it.
So true.
Another great example is Deloitte Australia. They address this by providing incredibly specific training for their employees on boundary management and digital well-being.
They actually train them on how to log off.
Yes, they treat setting boundaries in a hybrid environment as a technical skill that must be taught, not just some natural instinct that everyone magically possesses.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. There's this irony that unstructured flexibility, just vaguely telling people to work whenever they want, actually causes massive anxiety.
It does. Which brings us to the second strategy, which focuses on outcome-focused performance rather than hours.
How do companies actually enforce that? Because old habits die hard.
Atlassian is a prime example here with their Team Anywhere policy.
What do they do?
They evaluate objective key results, entirely disregarding hours logged or physical presence.
Wow. So it's essentially grading a college student on the quality of their final thesis rather than tracking whether they sat in the library for exactly 40 hours to write it. The output is all that matters.
That is a perfect translation. Traditional performance management relies on input measures like, can I physically see you typing at your desk?
Which is terrible for hybrid work.
Atlassian rejects that presence-based evaluation entirely. By granting immense autonomy in how the work gets done, while maintaining strict accountability for what gets done, they directly satisfy that autonomy pillar of self-determination theory we discussed earlier.
Okay, but let's address a very real anxiety for the listener.
Sure.
If you're listening to this at home right now, and your manager's in the office 3 days a week with a few of your peers, you've probably felt that creeping dread of proximity bias.
Oh, proximity bias is a huge issue.
Right. It's that fear that you are missing out on promotions or good assignments simply because you aren't in your manager's line of sight. How does the playbook solve that?
That brings us to the third strategy, recognition and visibility. It is vital to fight proximity bias, which is just the very natural human tendency to favor the people physically closest to us.
So how do you fight human nature?
Salesforce attacks this with a digital platform called Trailblazer Connect. It allows employees globally to track and share peer recognition.
Oh, I see. So it creates a digital paper trail of social proof.
Yes, but more importantly, this peer recognition data feeds directly into formal performance reviews.
That's brilliant.
By engineering visibility into the system, Salesforce ensures that a remote employee's contributions are just as visible and formally valued as the person sitting in the cubicle right next to the boss.
It purposefully sustains that competence pillar.
Exactly. Which leads right into the fourth strategy, addressing the relatedness pillar, social connection.
Because if we aren't organically running into each other in the break room, those moments have to be engineered.
They do. Automatic, the company behind WordPress, is a fantastic case study here. They're fully distributed across 70 countries.
They fully distributed, like no office at all.
They don't even have a central office to fall back on. To offset that immense physical distance, they rely on highly active, asynchronous chat, formal buddy systems for every single new hire. And this is key, incredibly intensive, week-long in-person meetups every single year.
So they do get together, it's just very concentrated.
Right. They view social connection not as a distraction from the work, but as the fundamental infrastructure that makes the work possible.
Okay, so we have autonomy, competence, relatedness. What is the final strategy in the playbook?
Development pathways. Gen Z demands growth. If they can't see a future, they bounce.
So who is getting the development piece right?
Accenture tackles this directly. They require tracked learning hours through their Accenture Academy.
Okay, lots of companies have learning portals, though.
True, but they don't just leave employees alone with a digital portal. They pair that required learning with dedicated human career counselors.
So there's a relationship there.
Yes, it satisfies the competence need by ensuring constant guided growth.
So looking at Microsoft, Deloitte, Atlassian, Salesforce, Automatic, and Accenture, the common thread here isn't a specific software tool.
Not at all.
It's intentionality. They aren't just crossing their fingers and hoping for fulfillment to organically happen. They're aggressively engineering it into the system.
That is the big takeaway.
But I have to ask, do all these tactical badges, training hours, and outcome metrics actually work if the underlying relationship between the company and the employee is fundamentally broken?
That is a great question.
Because it feels like we might just be putting high-performance tires on a car with a cracked engine block.
And that is the ultimate insight of Dr. Westover's paper. The tactical strategies we just covered, they are highly effective. But they completely fail if they don't rest on a fundamental recalibration of the psychological contract.
The psychological contract, explain that.
The old model of the psychological contract was beautifully simple, but it is now completely dead.
Rest in peace. What was it?
The employee provided unquestioning loyalty and physical presence, and the employer provided job security and a predictable 30-year ladder to climb.
Okay, yeah, that world is definitely gone.
Yeah.
So what replaces it? Because if the new contract is based on mutual value creation,
Yes.
as research suggests,
Right.
does that mean companies are basically admitting, look, we know you're only going to be here for 2 years, so let's just extract the maximum amount of value from each other while you are?
That's how a lot of people interpret it.
Doesn't that conditional relationship sound incredibly cynical? Like it would destroy any chance of genuine loyalty.
This raises an important point, and it is the exact fear most traditional executives harbor. But the research proves the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, that level of transparency actually builds profound trust. Look, Gen Z has watched traditional corporate loyalty yield very little actual security for previous generations.
You've seen their parents get laid off after 20 years.
Exactly. So when a company is completely honest that employment is an ongoing conditional choice rather than a lifelong marriage, it rings true. It's authentic.
Do you have a real-world example of that?
Patagonia. They make explicit, transparent commitments to employee well-being and mission alignment. They tell you exactly what their values are, and they expect you to align with them.
And the result?
They experience incredibly low turnover, even without offering the highest compensation in their sector. The authenticity of the contract creates the retention.
So transparency replaces blind loyalty. How does that impact the actual day-to-day management, though?
It forces a shift toward distributed leadership.
Which means?
Well, Spotify uses a squad model that pushes decision-making authority all the way down to cross-functional teams.
So the managers aren't dictating every move.
Right. They actively remove hierarchical bottlenecks and give the people actually executing the work the power to make the calls.
It's treating employees like adults, basically.
Exactly. Rather than a parent-child dynamic where the manager magically holds all the answers.
And I imagine this ties into finding purpose in the work, too.
It absolutely demands a relentless focus on purpose and continuous learning. The Cleveland Clinic is a great example here.
What do?
They train even their non-clinical administrative staff on how their specific daily tasks impact the overarching patient's first mission.
That's powerful. Everyone understands the why behind their spreadsheet.
Yes. And General Electric does something similar with learning. They frame continuous education not as a fun perk, but as a mutual obligation.
The company provides the platform, and the employee is obligated to keep expanding their skill set.
You got it. And perhaps the most radical shift in this new psychological contract is the concept of exiting with dignity.
Exiting with dignity.
Yeah. When an employee eventually decides to leave, progressive companies no longer treat it as a betrayal.
Oh, I've definitely seen some managers take resignations way too personally.
Right. But now, smart companies treat it as a natural transition. It's an opportunity to expand their external network.
That lack of toxicity around departing must be highly appealing to a generation that values authenticity above almost everything else.
It's a huge selling point.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? As we synthesize these massive shifts, the overarching takeaway for the learner is pretty undeniable.
It really is.
Work fulfillment in the permanent hybrid era is not a soft, nice-to-have HR perk. It is a hard, measurable strategic imperative.
Completely agree.
Whether you are a leader trying to prevent your Gen Z talent from walking out the door, Or maybe you're a Gen Z professional trying to navigate your own career.
Or just someone trying to protect your own weekends.
Yes. If you're simply trying to optimize your own hybrid work life, the blueprint is right here. Understanding that logistical flexibility is totally meaningless unless it is paired with structured engagement, outcome-based metrics, and a deep, authentic sense of shared purpose. That is the only way forward.
It demands absolute rigor. Organizations have to apply the exact same level of investment, psychological insight, and analytical thinking to their employee experience that they currently reserve for, say, their product development and financial strategies.
They have to treat it like a core business function.
Exactly. The companies that figure out how to satisfy autonomy, competence, and relatedness through a screen, those are the ones that will win the next decade of talent.
They absolutely will.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought inspired by Dr. Westover's research.
Let's hear it.
The paper makes it clear that physical distance naturally weakens the emotional bonds that used to anchor us to an organizational identity. The grand buildings, the logos in the lobby, the corner offices, they're kind of fading.
You really are.
If our workspaces continue to dematerialize into pure digital environments, just avatars, Slack channels, and shared documents,
Yeah.
what will belonging to a company even look like in 10 years?
That's a profound question.
If the physical office ceases to exist as a cultural anchor, will we eventually stop working for places altogether and only work for purposes?
Wow.
It is something to deeply consider the next time you open your laptop at your kitchen table and fire up that incredible, powerful wireless landline. Take these frameworks back to your own teams, challenge your existing workflows, and start engineering a little more actual fulfillment into your day. Thanks for joining us.